Okay, first up is Clive, and I'm just going to delete these guys to get them out of the way when viewing this. Um, and so yeah, it looks like you've got some good basic shapes in there. I think let's just take a look at some of the proportions. One thing that's clever to do, I see you have windows on one side. I would just assume that they have the same windows on the other side as well. Um, and One thing that's good to measure the proportions is choose something on the image, like say a window, and measure things by the window. So like, maybe there's, for these windows, maybe there's like, a third of a window below this, or maybe half a window between there and the bottom, and, you know, maybe half a window between there and the top of that. And then this thing is maybe a window and a half high, and you can just actually get in and measure with your fingers, or cut it out and measure it in Photoshop or something. And just looking at proportions, the this is a bit thick here compared to that's very thin, and there's kind of a triangle that's filled in here. You can see those things. You can add that detail. Um, Obviously, you have these guys up here, and I think this went up a bit high. Maybe not though, but it does look a little bit high. Overall, I think this looks like it should be wider. Like as far as width, there's probably at least a window, maybe more width to the left of that. And I think your windows themselves look very narrow. I think they could be wider than they are in here. And the door looks like it could be wider and then more space between. So the whole thing needs to be like scaled out this way, which you can do if you select everything and do Control G for group, R for scale, and you can scale the whole thing out like that. It's a good way to get started on that. It's already looking a little closer to me. So just check proportions against this, and keep going with adding detail to the model. Next up is Deonte, and this is a very good start. Looks like you're paying good attention to the proportions of things. One thing about both this staircase and this upper deck is, to me, it looks like it's wider at the back and gets narrower towards the front here. At least a little bit. So you might want to do that. You could just select these, go to, actually just hit component mode over here, and then select these ones and R for scale, and just scale that out a little bit. And you could do the same on the top, and I would get in there and count the number of these little guys that you have here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, something like that. Anyways, count them up and try to match those. You've got this thing on the side. I think in general the proportions are pretty believable otherwise. And just start adding that detail. You've got a lot to add. Don't forget these little white pieces on the side here, and you have some of these complex shapes here you can try to do. But overall, I think this is good blocking of the shapes, and keep going. Next up is Anna, and this looks like a good start. I'm just kind of lining it up with the other one to check the proportions. I think overall it's pretty good. I feel like maybe this part's a bit too tall. Get to bring that down some, which would mean bringing the roof down too. You can get that kind of the detailed line there on the roof would be good to add. I think the window pane separators are a bit thick. I think these could be, narrowed down like so. And maybe the frame's a little bit too And note it's a little hard to see, but note some of the detail on the post here on the column. How you've got these parts sticking out. I think that'd be great to add as well as you start getting into detail. I can see that you've added these individual guys. Oh, you did that all with booleans. Interesting. Okay, looks like. I would just assume make individual cubes for each of those, but I guess it doesn't matter as long as you get the result you want. Make sure you have these pieces coming up, and just match the number of these. I can show you a trick to get the spacing correct if we want to see that, so that's going to be helpful to everyone, I think. So let's say there's, well, I won't count the n ones, so I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So I believe it's 19, not including the n ones. And then I guess 21 if we did want to include the n ones. So what you can do is I'll make a cube. I'm going to do W and then hold down V for point snap to get that close and scale it down and make this longer and make it narrower. Okay, I think I might, let's just delete this out for now. Okay. So I have this a little bit in from the side, like so. And I think there's like a space at the bottom, so this is going to be narrower. Maybe a little narrower this way, maybe a little taller. Alright, something like that. And then, so that's this one on this side, and let's do another one. Well, I guess that's the first one, right? So we want it there to go a little bit before the end here. So it is possible to measure distances if you want. If you go to create measure tools, distance tool, and I can say maybe starting from here, I just point snapped, I held down V to point snap to that, and then I'll say to here, so that's 3.7, let's call it, but I kind of want to shorten this a little bit so that it, leaves a gap at the other end. So I guess let's call it about 3.6. Alright, I might get rid of that measure tool now. By the way, you might want to clean up your outliner a little bit here. So we said 3.6. So we're going to duplicate that using duplicate special options, and just make sure to reset first. Edit reset, and we know there's 1 and we want 19 total, so I just need 18 more, and we want to translate it in this direction, which is the negative x direction. So this column is x, this column is y, this column is z. So we'll put a number in here, and we said we want to spread out over 3.6 units, 18 of these. So if I get my calculator, and I say 3.6 divided by 18 is 0.2. Well, that's easy. So minus 0.2, because it's a negative x direction, because that's a positive, because the arrow's pointing that way. So this is the negative x direction, and 18 of them. Let's see if I did it right. Yay. Okay, pretty good. So that's a way to get, perfectly evenly spaced little, whatever you want to call these things. And it's a good technique to know. And if if you get it wrong, you can always undo and adjust the numbers until you get a result that you like. But I like that better. Not only can it save you some time, although you could probably have duplicated them manually just as fast, but I just like how it's perfectly uniform. Um, okay, yeah. So overall, this is looking like a good start. So just keep going, adding that detail. Next up is Romello. First, you mentioned using Blender, and and I asked that in future you do everything in Maya, as that's the main point of the class is to learn Maya. I think you're doing this one. Um, I'm not sure. You would put abandoned or stable. Um, and I think on the one hand, it's good that you've done these individual pieces. However, it's not really looking a lot like the photograph. So you got all this whole sidebar and these columns and this whole piece, and the doors are wider, and if these are the boards, these individual boards, there's many more of them and they're much skinnier. So yeah, I think you need to really take another pass at trying to match the overall shape and construction of the image you're trying to match. Um, so yeah, just I think you may just want to. I would just start over personally. I don't think it would take too long to get started over, and you don't have to do the individual boards. I mean, it's a nice touch, but more important is getting the overall thing built. So if you can manage to do it in the time, that would be good. But really try to match the image because right now you're missing, a lot of it. So yeah, keep going on that. Next is the jersey, and yeah, overall this is looking good. Good proportions on all this. I can see that you've really paid attention to that. I like that you've put these boards in principle, except that they're way more narrow than the ones on here. So if you are going to do it, you should make them accurate to that. And if you watched a previous video, I showed how you can do that using duplicate special. So you can measure the distance and then use duplicate special to duplicate the right number of boards over a certain distance. So you could, it'd be hard to count these since it gets pretty blurry over here, but you could sort of guess. You could say like one. It's hard to see, but like 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, 10. Call like a certain distance here 10 and go like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. Call it 90 boards, and you can then figure out the distance there with the measure tool. Create measure tool, distance tool, and I'll hold down V for point snap and put 1 point here, 1 point there. And so it's about 20 units. Okay, so we said 90 boards, 20 units. And then you want to put like a small gap between each one. So maybe I'll just use this one to start with. I might move the pivot point of this if I hold D for pivot point move mode, and drag this over here. Then I can just scale it from the side. To get that narrower. I mean, I guess I can do the math, right? If it's, but I'm not starting from an exact. Maybe I am. So, guess let's get the calculator back out. And if I said 20 divided by 90, it's like 0.2, and then that the continuing could just be the gap between them. So maybe these are each point too big. So where's my channel box? Yeah, see, that's a little tricky because the scale, I don't think it's representing the actual size, because it might not have started out as 1 unit depending on how you built it. So it might be easier to just start out with a regular cube and scale it down to 0.2 and then move that to position, and then something like that, and then move the pivot point. Oops. Just holding down D and V to move the pivot point there. I'll scale this like so. Okay. Make it flatter, I think. Alright. So then we said we wanted 90 of these, is that right? Just getting rid of these wide ones. Just look at the top view. Be easier to select there. Okay. And then I can use this full screen because that's not. So it's moving in the negative x direction. That's a positive x, so this is negative x. And we'll do edit, duplicate special options, and reset it before you do it. And then, so we said negative x, so we want to move a little bit more than 0.2. So I'll move them 0.22, but negative 0.22. And we already have one of them. So we're at 90 total, so we'll say 89, and let's see how that does for us. Oh, pretty good. So yeah, we got those little gaps in between, and then if you want, there was those areas here. You could just take these guys, and I wasn't smart, and I do have the pivot point here, so that kind of worked out that the pivot point was snapped there, because you know when you scale now, it scales so that the front end stays there. So you get all those. And then there's this issue here. I'm just going to isolate this object so we can see this more clearly. Oh. What is the issue? What's that diagonal weirdness about that? Maybe just isolate this one. Huh. Is it that thing? Oh, it's this thing. Okay, well, oh, so there's no. So that's, yeah. Well, I would just, build a separate frame thing. So let me just, let's just get rid of that for the moment. And then it looks like you tried to do a Boolean thing here and something went a little funny. So I generally say I don't like Booleans. They have kind of bad results. So I'll go ahead and isolate this object, and that's weird. Like when I isolate, oh, you must have another object in there. Oh, I see. And so that, okay, so that's blocking out the hole. So the hole worked fine. Got these extra things there. It's just the frame didn't around the outside didn't work out right. I just want to show you. I'll show you using the multi-cut tool because I like it for a lot of this kind of stuff. Mesh tools, multi-cut tool, and I'm going to hold down Control and Shift, or is it just just Shift? And let me make sure I do this in a good spot, probably out there, and just slice like all the way through. And We can always move these afterwards too, but it's a little difficult because normally you'd be able to just, hold down control and do it this way. But then we don't get a cut all going all the way through the surface. So I'll go ahead and put these, hold down shift to go all the way through the surface. Like so, I'm just being a little messy. And then I can select these by double clicking on them. If I want to move them at all, I can just move them now. That one didn't go all the way through, I guess this one. I can get rid of this edge right here. I do shift right mouse click. I can delete edge like that. Anyway, I was thinking about this as another approach to making the outline to the door, but now it seems like I messed up here. But I guess what I was also pointing out is this is another way of cutting out something like a shape where you make these lines and you can just delete out, any of these faces. But I think that what I was going to say was to have you extrude out these, which would sort of work. Shift right mouse click extrude face, like you could pull out the door frame that way. I guess that's alright. Yeah, I was a little afraid of it kind of overlapping this side, but I think it's close enough. So that's just another approach to pulling out that door frame. You could also just, make it out of cubes or whatever. Yeah, but overall this one's looking really good sense of proportions, so just keep going with the details. Next up is Vivian, and you got a start to this. I think you've got a ways to go. Looking at sort of general proportions, one of the things I'm noticing is that the height here of these window holes, you see there's about as much room above it as the height of the window itself, whereas in your model there's only that narrow area there. So I might I'll move this up for the moment. Whoops. And select all of these and go into component mode and select all the points on the top and move that up a bunch. And then the other thing is that this side's much longer, I think, and these windows are much more spread out. And your windows are very narrow compared to the width of that. Like this window is kind of narrow in front, but it's about half the width of those. So I think this whole thing needs to stretch out quite a lot, this way. Actually, let's put this back down. Let's grab the object. And just doing a component mode so I can do all of them together. So, yeah, like I said, this needs to come out quite a lot. And these guys, can be sort of spread out here. I'm just going to hold down Control, which will deselect those. Make the windows wider. Put more space in between them. Just using Control Select to deselect those each time. Something like that. So far to me that's looking, a lot more. And then kind of repeat that process for this side and spread all that out. I guess we can take a look maybe at the right view. Might be helpful. So we get all those selected. Just kind of move that out. I think this is closer to this side than it is to that side, so just deselect these. See, I want to make sure I still have all these selected. There, okay. Then pull that out a little bit more. Okay. So already to me that's a little better. I think there's actually, this space is much wider too. This, see how wide that is compared to this here. So for that is a little trickier. So guess I might select all these maybe and pull it out this way and then maybe pull it forward a bit, something like that. And then just recenter this stuff. A little sloppy, but it's alright. Just widening that a little bit. Whoops, I didn't mean to select these guys. Anyway, you know, used to put more time into that and more closely match the stuff, but that's kind of getting a little bit better of a start. You can add detail like this thing on top and this edge and those things, and of course all the window frames and these columns. And next up is J-Min. I might just start by getting all these extra things out of the way. Okay, yeah, this is a good start. I think the proportions look pretty decent overall. Got the right number of columns. I think that this staircase looks much narrower to me, and I notice this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 steps, and you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So, you know, and also they're kind of, I guess they're alright. It's kind of weird the way they line up with this. I would expect the front edge of this to kind of line up with this here. You know, sort of, it's in a group. They're not. It's also this, it's weird how this first one is there and then, so yeah, I might, you know, redo those so they're both narrower, because these look narrower, and that there's the right number of them, and that they line up with that line. But you know, by that I mean, you know, push them back so that they're like that, I think. Maybe, I don't know. That's kind of what it looks like to me. But yeah, you've got these two holes there. You've got this is nice and short. Again, you know, I won't count this right now, but you know, there's a lot. I think a lot more of these than what you have. So, and I've demonstrated already a couple times, so I probably won't do it again. If you just watch some of the previous critiques of how to measure the distance and evenly space these, it's you know, it's a quick and easy way to get all those in. Yeah, and then there's detail you can add on these columns. Look at these kinds of things here. You'll want to add, obviously, the window frames. Good that you got the sign in there already. So there's a lot of good work on this already. It's a fairly complex building. Clearly, you're paying attention to the proportions. So yeah, just keep going. Good work. Next up is George, and yeah, this one's looking good. Looks like you've got a lot of the detail in there, which is nice. Wondering why that's showing up like that. It's kind of weird. Thought it might be that two-sided lighting thing. Sometimes it's you have to reverse normals on some of these faces. Can help with that. But I think if two-sided lighting didn't do it, that wouldn't. Oh, that did do it. Okay, so just select the faces and then normals reverse, and then that'll show up normally again. Yeah, I think this window frame's sticking out a bit too much. And I think, these are very low and very small and square, and I think these are much bigger and taller, so you might adjust the size of the windows to match this a little bit better. And I see you've started some detail, but then you can start adding in. Notice how thin these window pane separators are, so get those in, and yeah, you can add the sign if you want, and add the barrel if you want. So there's some detail to add, a few little proportions adjustments, although I would say the proportions are generally good. I think there's kind of like a crossbar here you can add, I believe, underneath the top of that awning. And yeah, overall it's looking good. So yeah, just keep going with the details and make a couple proportion fixes. Next up is Zanna, and I believe you chose the saloon, although so far this doesn't really look like it. It looks like you went um, sort of free form on this, although the idea is more to try and match the model. So I think there's some interesting, detail and choices you've made, and some good kind of overall blocking. However, the idea is to try and match the source image. So it might take a step back and see if you can get that to match, and add the detail you see in the image. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing, as far as modeling, there's nothing really wrong about what you've built. It's just that it doesn't match the source, unless I'm mistaken and you were trying to do something different. But I believe you did choose the saloon. Um, so I think, yeah, kind of take a step back and try to match that. Next up is Leo, and yeah, it looks like you have a pretty good start. I think there's some proportional fixes here, like I think this is much taller and more narrow than you have it, and these windows at the top are much more square and smaller than that. The door's kind of taller and more narrow, and this kind of comes out too far compared to that. These windows look wider and further apart than these, so I think you've got a lot of little adjustments to make. This looks a bit too thick there. Um, so yeah, do another. I mean, you've got the basic shapes, which is good, but the proportions are off. So go back and do a fix on the proportions, and then work on adding in your detail. Next up is Melissa, and yeah, there's a lot of good progress on this. There's already some good detail. I think that you will need to work on some of the proportions. These, oh wow, that's built into that, is it? These guys here are very big compared to those. These are kind of much smaller and narrower, and those are much wider and longer than on the image. And this distance from here to here should be deeper. It should be coming out further, which overall means also the porch here should be deeper along with that building. It should pull out. And I think this window's good, but I think it should maybe scoot down. Also, this should be a little taller. If you can compare the height here between that top of that window and the top there to the top of the window and the top of this here, there's much more distance there. And you'll also notice that this line of the facade in front of this main building here, about meets the peak, maybe just overlaps the peak of this section, whereas yours overlaps it quite a lot. Whereas I think that should more be around here. And I would probably say that this goes further back as well. I don't think it's quite so shallow as you have it. Yeah, so those are the main things that are jumping out to me. Maybe the height of this window could be higher, but I think that'll go up when this goes up as well. So yeah, lots of things to fix. I mean, you have plenty of little nice details you can add a lot with some of these objects if you want to model some of those in. But let's get the proportions right first before doing a lot more detail. Next up is Chris, and yeah, it's looking pretty good overall. I think you'll want to add in this piece here. I think as far as proportions, the front's looking okay. I think these columns are going to be. Oh, did you combine this for some reason? They were all separate and then they got combined. So I generally don't recommend that unless there's a real specific reason to do it. But anyway, I was just going to say these, we can separate it now. Um, these look like they need to be more narrow, and you can see the kind of shape that they have. So trying to get that shape in will be nice. I think this porch is much thinner here than you've got it, and you get these a little bit more evenly spaced. Also, yeah, I think the window frames are going to be thinner. This distance here is a bit thick, and maybe, yeah, just a little less wide, the windows. Same with the front ones, they look a little wide. And I think you've got more going on here. I think there's just the top and bottom window pane on these. There's not all these separations, which look a little, I'm not sure how you did that. It's hard to tell with all this history here, I don't know. But it looks a little odd. Oh, I like this little detail. Although I can't see it in there, but it's nice that you've added that. Although, while this stuff in the door is interesting, it looks to me more like there's like a window on the top, and then window panes in the door. So I try to match that more closely. And I guess that's the sign, but it sort of looks like another. Like, I don't know what those are. And what produced these X's? That's quite unusual. Be interested to know more about how you modeled that. And yeah, this roof isn't right because the peak is up along the middle, and you have the peak going, across like that. But it should be, there, as you can see in this image. And yeah, so you've got some of the basics. The proportions aren't too far off. I think this stuff is smaller, than I think that's going to be a little bigger. But as you start adding it in, it'll come together. So yeah, a few fixes in there, but it's coming along. By the way, this is Chavis. I'm not sure if I got the name right when I started the critique. Next up is Tasha, and yeah, at first glance, there's some pretty major issues with the proportions. So I'm just, first of all, if we look at this building and the width of the bottom versus the height, so this is like, it's sort of this more square first floor compared to the height. It's a very tall and narrow building, but that doesn't really match the shape of this building, which has this much wider ground base, and the length of the platform, it's going to be a lot bigger. I don't know if I went too far, but much bigger. This is going to be, just grab this and not those. Oops, let's just group that. Control G for group. Getting a little bit more of that idea. Something like that. You can see it's starting to match that a little more closely. And then this stuff is going to be, more over here, and these are more spread out. And this is just a little thing on top of, to cover these guys from the rain. It's just kind of a little roof here, which you see it starts, you know, behind the front edge of this building, so that's going to be much more narrow. Maybe these are actually closer, something like that. Anyway, so you're starting to see that just a very quick couple of moves that the proportions are a little closer, but I think you need to, and you have this like second awning here, which you need to add, and check out the width and height of the door compared to the height of the building. So I think you've got a lot of big proportional things to fix first, and then go back in and work on the detail. Next up is Haley, and again you've got the basic shapes, which is good. I can see you're paying attention to the proportions, although I would say that the whole building is much taller compared to the width than what you've got. Like if I grabbed all these and went in component mode and then grab these verts, and I'm just holding Control and Shift to add to my selection there. I might pull all those up quite a bit, to get that closer to that shape. Yeah, and the door and the windows, not too bad. Once you get the frame on there, I think you'll be able to tell then. You can add those signs. You can add the chair if you want. There's some nice detail. I think this window could be a little bit bigger, looking at that one. And maybe the roof has a bit more of a slant. It looks a little bit flat compared to the angle of this one, the way that one comes down. So might take these and pull those down some, and then I think then you'd have to correspondingly move these down. Something like that. I think I might have gone too far, but you get the idea. And yeah, so I think you got some basic stuff in there. I think some proportions adjustments, and then start adding in some of this nice detail here, and that will be good. And just look out for the thickness of these window pane separators. Those look quite thick compared to how thin these look, so try to get those to match better. Next up is Wilson, and first just looking at the proportions, I think it's much taller than what you've got here. The whole thing is going to be much higher compared to the width. And I didn't quite understand what you were saying about the booleans not being able to select them or something, but another approach could be using the multi-cut tool. So mesh tools, multi-cut, and if I hold the control key, I can just orient that line and then just click each place I want to put in a line, and then do it vertically as well. Let's look at this from the front. Oops, I don't like that last one. Just undid it with Z. And I can do ones for that too, as it's narrower. And then I guess I need the I'm just holding down control to make these lines. I guess I need it on these as well. And I'm being a little rough. You could be a little bit more accurate than that, but I'm just trying to do this quickly. So once you've gotten those, I can take that and then just make the holes like so. Instead of using the So that's, a different approach to doing that rather than booleans if you're having some problem with that. Um, and it gives you a more kind of sound surface, whereas the booleans tend to kind of mess things up. So yeah, work on the proportions, get those things cut out. Um, start putting in all the detail, like these things in the window panels and frames, and this piece along the top here, and so forth. You can add in the barrel, make the front porch look a bit deep here. I think that distance is actually much shorter than this one, so adjust that as well, and keep going. Okay, yeah, the next step is Shanice, and yeah, I think you've got to start to some of the shapes. There's some odd stuff going on here where it looks like you did everything as kind of an extrude or something. Yeah, there's a lot of extruding on here, quite a bit, which can sometimes be good and other times not. I think you're kind of missing this shape on top because it just sort of comes to a peak and then goes back down. What's weird is how this whole wall has been pulled out there. I don't think you want to do that. You could grab these verts here, not that one, push those back in to get that wall flat again. And I think this window is basically much too big compared to the size of that window frame. So I wouldn't try to do all of these things with extrude. I would kind of just try to build the basic shapes and have them as separate objects, most of them. I'm having trouble seeing how this shape you've got going on here is going to result in that, kind of three-sided, 1, 2, three-sided shape there, where, and it's, yeah, it's the shape doesn't really match that at all right now. And also this goes all the way out to the edge, where here there's a lot of space there, and then there's, and I'm not even sure what that is. That's supposed to be the sign, I guess, but the sign's actually much smaller and further up. So yeah, there's some, and then the roof isn't slanted down like this one. So I would kind of take some, step backwards and try to get like the basic shapes with simple objects first, rather than trying to extrude everything out. And just try and match the proportions of the object. Pay attention between like the distance of the corner to the edge of the door. Where this is much shorter and that was much wider. The distance between the door and the window. The distance between the window and the edge of the building, where here there's none. The shape of the window. So I really think you need to take a step back and work on this. Maybe start over with, because it's hard with the extrudes. There's not really an easy way to like take them out, without a lot of extra work. So I would start over with some simpler shapes and go forward from there.